Welcome to the War Dossier, where wars become stories. Picture a palace so grand that the ceilings are painted with clouds and dragons, where a ruler called the Son of Heaven signs edicts with a brush older than most European kingdoms. Now picture the same palace hearing. Faint at first, the grind of iron on sea. Steamships loaded with cannon and opium, flags you can't read, and a timetable you can't control. If you want to know how the Middle Kingdom became the battlefield of modern Asia, stay close, because in a few minutes you'll meet a reformer emperor placed under house arrest, a general who crowned himself, a young librarian from Hunan with a plan to win a war without winning a battle, and the moment a nation chooses between memory and survival. Our story begins with a paradox. The Qing Dynasty, Manchu conquerors ruling a vast Han Chinese majority, kept order with a civil service exam older than the printing press and a confidence older than gunpowder. To Beijing, foreigners were tribute people. To foreigners, China was a market with a door that wouldn't open. That door splintered. European traders did not bow. They bargained. Tea, silk, porcelain flowed out. Silver flowed in. Then British opium turned the silver tide around. The Qing tried to stop it. Britain sent ships. Cannon spoke the language of free trade. The treaties that followed were called unequal for a reason. Ports opened under foreign law, tariffs fixed, missionaries protected by gunboat promises. The Forbidden City was still forbidden, but nothing outside it was. While court memorials debated the morality of steam engines, the world industrialized. Provincial governors, far from the red walls of Beijing, grew powerful. Corruption spread like mold through an old house. For the farmer on a plot barely big enough to feed a family, the tax collector's seal mattered more than the emperor's seal. Famine could make rebels overnight. And yet the dynasty still projected calm. It had done the impossible once, uniting a mosaic the size of Europe. Why not again? Because a new rival had crossed the sea with a mirror. For centuries, China saw Japan as an eager student of Chinese letters and rights. But in the late 19th century, the student rewired the classroom. The Meiji state took railways, rifles, and Prussian drill and fused them to samurai discipline. In 1894, they looked across the water to Korea, long under Chinese influence, and asked a brutal question. Who decides Korea's future now? The First Sino-Japanese War answered it. Japanese columns moved like clockwork. Qing formations moved like memory. But at the Yalu River, the Beiyang fleet, China's pride, was shattered. In 1895, the Treaty of Shimonoseki cut deep. Taiwan ceded. Korea pried away. Indemnities that hollowed the treasury. The symbol stung even more than the loss. Japan, the little brother, had beaten the Middle Kingdom in open war. Shock became fissures. Scholar officials begged the court to modernize. Factories, railways, schools teaching physics, not only classics. For 100 days in 1898, Emperor Guangxu tried. He signed edicts like a drowning man swimming for the surface. New curricula, modern arsenals, administrative overhaul. One problem. The throne wasn't his to move. Behind the screen stood the Dowager Empress Cixi, master of palace politics. The emperor was placed under guard. Reformers fled, were silenced, or died. The 100 days ended. The century did not forgive. Humiliation piled into rage. In the drought-stricken north, rumours spread. Missionaries fixed the skies. Telegraph poles were dragon bones pinned to the earth. Railways cut feng shui lines. A peasant fist movement, the Boxers, mixed martial rituals with nationalism and fury. Their blades went first to Chinese converts, then to foreign compounds. The court, wavering, finally gambled on the Boxers and declared war on 8 great powers at once. The 8 came. Beijing fell. The Forbidden City was not merely entered. It was inventory. The Boxer Protocol that followed stationed foreigners on Chinese soil and shackled a future with indemnities measured in decades. Something broke, not just pride, faith in the dynasty itself. New words blew in: republic, parliament, citizen. Abroad, a doctor named Sun Yat-sen knocked on doors from Honolulu to London, raising money for a revolution many in China still whispered about. At home, the empire tried reforms with one hand while clutching the old order with the other. It was too slow. When a mutiny flared in Wuchang in October 1911, the fire raced down the Yangtze faster than a courier could carry an imperial command. Provinces declared independence from the dynasty that had united them. By early 1912, a 6-year-old emperor, Puyi, abdicated with a brush too heavy for his hand. 2,000 years of imperial rule ended with a quiet stroke and a loud question: what now? Sun Yat-sen, revolutionary, Christian, idealist, was made provisional president of a Republic of China that did not yet control China. He traded that seat to the only man who could order modern troops: Yuan Shikai, commander of the Beiyang army. Sun believed Yuan could hold the country while a real republic took root. Yuan believed a strong man could save China, specifically himself. Parliament opened. Yuan dissolved it. Parties organized. Yuan outlawed them. In 1915, he announced a new dynasty, his. Even his generals rolled their eyes. Provincial armies rose. Yuan's empire collapsed before it crowned itself. He died soon after, leaving not a republic, but a map with bayonets for borders. The Warlord Era. Trains armoured and bristling with machine guns. Taxes paid in sacks of grain and sons. Capital cities auctioned by coalition. Some warlords built roads and schools. Many built mansions and arsenals. The foreign powers smelled advantage. Japan, amid the chaos of World War I, served the 21 demands like a legal theft. Britain, France, the US, all played the treaty ports like stock tickers. To students it felt like this: the Qing had fallen, but the humiliation stayed. Then Paris humiliated them again. China sent labourers to the Western Front expecting at Versailles at least the return of German holdings in Shandong. Instead, the conference handed them to Japan. On May 4, 1919, Beijing students poured into Tiananmen Square and changed a nation. Mr. Science and Mr. Democracy became slogans. Old hierarchies were mocked in magazines. Young writers shredded filial piety with the same ferocity the old state had used to shred dissent. And in a quiet room in Shanghai in 1921, a handful of young men founded the Chinese Communist Party. One of them, Mao Zedong, worked in a library sorting journals. He read everything. He remembered everyone who ignored the peasant in the story of revolution. Sun Yat-sen watched the same storm and did the math. His nationalist party, the Kuomintang, needed money, a modern army and discipline. Moscow offered all three, along with advisers who knew how to build a party state. Sun took the deal and welcomed communists to join the KMT as individuals. The first united front was born. Nationalists and communists, oil and water in the same bottle, aimed at a shared enemy: the warlords. Sun died in 1925, mourned as father of the Republic. His dream needed someone harder to carry it forward. The Whampoa Military Academy had just such a man, Chiang Kai-shek. Cool, disciplined, ambitious. In 1926, he launched the Northern Expedition, a rolling campaign that broke warlords or bought them, married gunfire to diplomacy, and moved the KMT capital northward. Bands played, cities cheered. For a minute it felt like unification, but alliances built on fear crack before those built on belief. As the United Front entered Shanghai in 1927, labour unions and communist organisers surged. Chiang saw not partners, but a rival army inside his columns. He chose. The April Purge bled the United Front white. union halls were raided, organisers shot, the alleys ran. The communists called it betrayal. Chiang called it necessary. Those who escaped ran where the KMT was weakest, the countryside. The party split. Moscow-trained ideologues wanted urban uprisings. Mao looked at the villages and saw an ocean of allies no one else was asking to fight. Cadres learned to eat last, pay for grain, teach at night, and fight at dawn. The KMT responded with encirclement campaigns, steel rings crushing communist base areas. With German advisors, Chiang tightened the ring in Jiangxi so hard that survival itself became strategy. The escape was insane. In October 1934, nearly 100,000 set out, soldiers, medics, smiths, printers, stretcher-bearers carrying more hope than ammunition. They were cut to pieces at the Shang River. They walked into winter and over mountains they named simply snowy. They crossed grasslands that swallowed horses and men. They boiled leather. They buried friends without markers because there was no time to carve names. In Zunyi, amid catastrophe, the party argued with itself and changed its spine. Mao's flexible, peasant-rooted war replaced the rigid textbook stratagems that had nearly killed them. When the Long March reached Yan'an a year later, 10,000 remained. It was a defeat that became a legend, because those who survived believed they had been chosen by endurance itself. While Chinese fought Chinese, Japan took what warlords couldn't defend. In 1931, a stage blast on the South Manchurian Railway justified a full-scale seizure of Manchuria. A puppet throne was built for the last Qing emperor, Puyi, an emperor without empire crowning a state without sovereignty. The League of Nations wrote a stern letter. Japan left the League. On the ground, villages burned. Chiang kept hunting communists. His own officers, men like Zhang Xueliang, the young marshal whose Manchuria had been taken, seethed. How do you fight brothers while foreigners take your house? In December 1936 in Xi'an, Zhang made his move. Chiang woke to bayonets and a new reality. His own generals had him. The communists chose not to shoot and not to gloat. Zhou Enlai, elegant and imperturbable, negotiated what the nation needed: stop the civil war, start the war of resistance. Chiang agreed, angrily, pragmatically. The Second United Front was born, colder and clearer than the first. War with Japan exploded in July 1937 at the Marco Polo Bridge. Within months, Shanghai was Stalingrad before Stalingrad, block by block, floor by floor, fought with modern artillery and the last breath of pride. Then Nanjing fell. What followed was not war, it was atrocity. Mass executions, systematic rape, a river choked with bodies. The world saw the photographs and learned a proper noun: Nanjing. The KMT bore most of the set-piece battles. They bled in numbers no army could sustain. They moved their capital to Chongqing and kept the state alive under bombs in caves. The communists fought differently. Behind enemy lines, building base areas, organising peasants, sabotaging rails and paying for rice. Both sides fired at Japan. Both planned for each other. The people watched carefully who shared their hunger, who took their daughters, who wrote down their names for land deeds, and who wrote them down for taxes. Then the world caught fire. Pearl Harbor pulled the US into war. China became one of the big four allies on paper and a starving ally in practice. American aid flew over the hump. Advisors advised. Corruption did what bombs couldn't: hollow a government from the inside. Inflation made salaries jokes. Rice was a currency. In the hills, Yan'an offered simple answers on crude paper. Literacy drives, land rents cut, serve the people. War had turned propaganda into trust. In 1945, Japan surrendered. In Beijing, fireworks. In Manchuria, warehouses full of rifles and shells. all suddenly ownerless. The communists moved fast to claim them. American envoys tried to broker peace between KMT and CCP. Smiles for cameras, knives for maps. By 1946, the truce was a rumour. Civil war resumed with new weapons, new lessons, and a new moral ledger. The KMT had more men, more planes, more cities. The CCP had momentum, method, and meaning. Mao and his generals avoided strengths, hunted weaknesses, and cut railways like veins. In Manchuria, they isolated, encircled, annihilated. 3 words repeated until entire armies surrendered rather than fight commanders who sold their rations. Land reform, first careful, then violent, made millions stake their future on the side promising to erase a landlord's ledger. In 1948, the tide became a flood. Liaoshen, Huaihai, Pingjin, 3 campaigns, 3 catastrophes for the KMT. Divisions vanished, commanders defected, civilians opened gates. In January 1949, Beijing capitulated. In April, the Yangtze was crossed. Nanjing fell without the redemption story a capital longs for. On October 1st, 1949, on a square, the May 4th students had once filled with outrage. Mao Zedong proclaimed a new state. The crowd roared back what millions felt. At last, unity. No emperor, no warlords, no puppet thrones. At last, a China that belonged to itself. The story did not end with the flag rising. The People's Republic moved quickly to turn promise into power. Land reform gave fields to those who worked them and graves to many who once owned them. For countless peasants, it was justice. For countless families, it was terror. Women gained rights by law, marriage by consent, the right to divorce, the right to learn. Schools multiplied. Clinics reached villages that had never seen a doctor. The state planned steel, grain, cement, and soon planned ambition itself. Ambition became disaster. The Great Leap Forward tried to vault centuries in 5 years with backyard furnaces and collectives writing numbers that harvests could not meet. Trees were cut for quotas. Pots melted for pride. Famine spread in whispers, then in funerals without coffins. Tens of millions died. Statistics do not grieve. Survivors did. Power shifted in silence. Mao stepped back, then stepped forward with a fury no one misread. In 1966, he called the young to bombard the headquarters. Red Guards answered, temples, books, teachers, parents, all targets if they bore the wrong labels. Struggle sessions, broken bones called ideology. 1 million small destructions added up to a nation's memory scarred. The army restored order, the party reasserted control. The wounds kept their own calendar. Mao died in 1976. His portrait still hangs. His shadow still falls at noon. For some, he's the man who ended the century of humiliation and gave the poor land status and a name worth saying aloud. For others, he is the author of famine and fear. For everyone, he is the hinge. Before him, a fractured empire. After him, a unified state that could at last decide its own mistakes. What did China's long war, from palace to people's commune, actually decide? It decided that an old civilization could be remade by modern violence, that foreign humiliation can fracture a dynasty, but only domestic choices decide what grows in the cracks. That armies marching in straight lines lose to movements marching in stories. The KMT had maps. The communists had myth, and then, eventually, ministries. It decided that unity would be purchased at a price the bill of which is still being tallied. The Qing fell for refusing to reform. The Republic fell for being a republic mostly in name. The PRC survived by turning promise into policy, and sometimes into punishment. If you're looking for heroes or villains, you'll find both, and sometimes in the same person. But for the farmer in Shanxi, the seamstress in Tianjin, the student in Peking, History was not an argument between isms. It was a door, closed, cracked, forced, and finally opened from the inside. You've just walked the corridor. If you want deep dives into each hinge moment, the 100 Days Reform, the Boxer Siege, the Xi'an Incident, the Long March, Nanjing's Week of Hell, subscribe to the War Dossier. We turn wars into stories you can actually feel, and we do it every week. Before you go, tell me this in the comments. Which decision was the true point of no return? The Empress Dowager's coup against reform, Chiang's purge in Shanghai, or the Communists' choice to fight the long war from the countryside? I read every take. Thanks for watching the War Dossier. See you in the next campaign.